flexible working hours and flexible working conditions like you have. And I think we should all advocate for that. It's not one or the other, but when you sit here and you go, you'll be more fulfilled doing this and spend all your time doing that, we would love for you to leave the public eye and go focus on what makes you fulfilled.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops, fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the pretty realist.
What's good, family? Welcome to Pretty Realist. If this is your first time joining my channel, welcome. I changed the background a little bit. I hope y'all like it. I know that Candace Owens right now is definitely going viral for so many reasons, and a lot of them ain't good. You know, she is definitely on a lot of conservatives' shit list. This is a free country. You're free to feel how you want to feel. But one thing I know about Candace, and one thing I'm going to always admire about her, she does not hold back how she feels. She doesn't mince words. And when I saw these clips of this debate, like, yo, I got to check out this event. I have to check it out. So basically, this is on Jubilee. If you do not follow Jubilee, please do. They have some really, really good content on their YouTube channel. But this is one conservative, which will be Candace, in which she's actually talking to a room full of feminists. The video is actually an hour and 38 minutes. Of course, you know I'm not going to play the entire video. Listen, I got my water right here. Because, honey, I got a feeling that I'm going to get thirsty. I ain't going to be able to sit still and keep quiet. Y'all know me.
Hi, my name is Candace Owens. I am a podcaster, a mother, a wife, and also the author of the upcoming book, Make Him a Sandwich. And today I am surrounded by 20 feminists.
It's like going into the lion's den.
My first claim is that the sexual revolution has devalued women and made them infinitely less happy.
Lion's Den.
Hi. Hello. Hi.
Hi, I'm Samaya.
Samaya, nice to meet you. I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you too. So my question for you is, statistics show that 60% of women who are murdered by their intimate partners, murdered by someone that they are in close relations with. That's according to the UN from 2023.
Yeah.
So how is it that, women are so valued, quote unquote, in the home, and yet that's the place where they're at the most danger?
Okay, so I'm not sure what that has to do with the sexual revolution.
Right, the sexual revolution.
The first claim.
The sexual revolution gave.
I'm happy to answer it. I'm just saying that, if you broaden that statistic, you are more likely in general just to be murdered by somebody you know. So, of course.
But men are much less likely to be murdered by, their
That's not
partners.
true.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm sure, because men are less likely to be murdered by women. Full stop. Yeah, exactly. So that statistic makes sense to me. I'm still not sure how this correlates to whether or not the sexual revolution
increased women's ability to leave the house, women's ability to control their own reproductive capabilities, women's ability to, control their own capacity within the workforce in regards to their own sexual capacity.
It also increased STDs in our country. It did that. It also increased single motherhood in our country. Since we're going to go right there, since this is what we're standing on. Listen, I understand that everybody, wants to be sexually liberated. Their phase, their whole phase where they're trying to figure out themselves. But at the same time, at some point, you got to understand that you're just racking up bodies, right? Your body it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for your soul. So just like a vehicle, the more miles that you put on a vehicle, the more upkeep it's going to take for you to keep it going, and eventually it will tucker out. Your body is the same way. The soul attachments that you are also allowing to enter into your womb. So the thing about this sexual liberation thing, I get it that it was a time in the 60s and the 70s because women were breaking free from being housewives, being at home, pregnant and barefoot, taking care of the home while the husband got to go out and work, and he was in control of the finances, control of the house, and women wanted to be able to do their own thing. And plus, at that time also, yes, domestic abuse was very much so common. But at the same time, we're in 2025 and y'all still trying to be sexually liberated, knowing that, we got all of these STDs out here. You got 55-year-olds catching gonorrhea now. You got teenagers. You got kids, real kids like 10, 11 years old who are watching porn. So the sexual revolution Even though it worked out for a specific time, at some point we got to realize that like it's dangerous. It's a dangerous lifestyle to be sexually liberated, to just want to sleep with all of these people just because you feel as if it makes you feel free.
Capacity. So it is the very fact that like the sexual revolution happened that made our access to the workplace much more, or just the public sphere in general, much more easy. So like without the sexual revolution, women would be much more confined to the place where they're at the most danger. Isn't that true?
So you think that, just so I'm trying to understand your argument here, you think that if we didn't have the sexual revolution, less women or more women would be murdered? Are you saying that women are
more women would be murdered, for sure.
Okay, I disagree with that. I still don't think it has anything to do with the claim that women are infinitely less happy because of the sexual revolution, which has devalued women.
I think you'd probably be less happy if you're being murdered.
Oh.
Anyone disagree?
Okay, yeah, I don't, okay. Okay. There is definitely a correlation between personal relationships and domestic violence. And just to be clear, if we're talking about just like a monogamous relationships, the most violent relationships that are on the books are between lesbian partners. Yes, when people are intimate,
that's not
that is actually true.
No, the statistic you're talking about is people who have faced domestic violence. Lesbians, yes, are more likely to have faced domestic violence, but that's because they typically came from relationships with men in which they were mistreated.
Lesbian relationships are the most violent relationships that we
They're also the ones that are getting divorced the most. Just want to throw that out there.
have on the book.
But we can move on.
They can fact check that claim. The point being is that it's not exactly a stunning statistic to say that when people are in relationships, period, whether those relationships are homosexual, whether they're
But
married,
you're saying that the sexual revolution...
Let me finish. I've let you try to explain how this is correlated to happiness, and I don't think it does. I actually think you're having a different debate right now. But yes, absolutely, it makes perfect sense that you are more likely in general when you are in a relationship because people are driven by anger by people that they know, whether or not we're talking about boyfriend and girlfriend, girlfriend and girlfriend, a husband and a wife, a husband and a husband, or a wife and a wife. Yes, of course, the instances of domestic violence are going to take place when you're inside of a home. But the sexual revolution, encouraging women to give up their goods for free, which is what I'm speaking about, and encouraging men not to marry these women or to have long-term relationships, what I am saying is a direct contributor to their unhappiness because women are giving up their goods for free and women are now entering the workplace and that does not actually make them happy.
Okay, pause. Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
It didn't really make any sense. Let's go to some statistics, okay? There's been a STD increase, probably more than it was around the time that the sexual revolution started. In fact, between 2020 and 2023, there's been a 4.8 increase. Hearing about how places like Houston, pretty much down south, how many STDs are going around. Single motherhood, with Black women holding the highest rate for single motherhood in this country, 47%. And we're only 13% of the population, but we have the highest rate of single motherhood in this country. 25% for Hispanics, 14% for whites, with Asians only having 8%. Asians, especially Indians, well, they're the same community, but they're very much so focused on family. Even Hispanics are more so focused on family. Black people, for some reason, we're the ones that end up suffering the most because of this sexual revolution. Because of the statistics, because we have the highest rate when it comes to STDs, the highest rate when it comes to HIV and AIDS, the highest rates when it comes to single motherhood, the highest divorce rate. Come on, man. So I'm saying all of this because there's a woman of color, there's a Black woman. I don't know if she's Black American, but she's sitting here spewing this nonsense. This is pretty much what feminism has done to Black women. It has made us extremely confused because we need our family. We need our community. We need our partners. We need to be in the house with our children. Because if not, then guess what? They're going to be the ones that's going to be out here on the corner trying to sell some nickel bags. They're the ones that's out here shooting up things because they don't have no type of community behind them or anything else going on. We're the ones that suffer the most because of this little liberation shit that y'all got going on. That's why they urge you to join, because the whole plan was to destroy our communities and destroy our families. So it's people like her, people with that mindset, because you're speaking for a community that you're not even supposed to be representing, that actually helped in the downfall of our community.
Hello.
Hi there.
How are you? I'm Candace.
Nice to meet you. Julian, my pronouns are they, them. It's very interesting to think of it when we just think about the
Why
gender
did you have
binary.
to say that?
It's, how do we place value on human beings in general? And so when we think about, placing value, that comes from a place of power, right? So I think let's select like the Victorian era. You have this dominant group of people coming from white supremacy, deciding who gets to have a proper status in the world. And so that is already like taking human beings and devaluing them. And so what the sexual revolution did was to help people seek out empowerment, which increased value, no matter the gender. So when it comes to sexual revolution, let's look at one contribution is sex education. I'm actually an educator. I teach sociology and LGBTQ studies. And I have absolutely seen the positive outcome with the sexual revolution and sex education and seen people empower themselves. And with that comes safety when it comes to decreasing STIs, abuse, sexual assault. Again, people get to empower themselves of all genders. And I know earlier you mentioned about violence amongst lesbians and sapphic community, which I do identify within. All genders can be subjected to violence.
That was the point I was making. So I wasn't sure of how her claim was relating to what we were talking about, whether or not it makes people happy or unhappy. Relationships are obviously a ground where there can be violence.
I guess I could just wrap it up by saying, like, if we all have access to like sex education through the incredible work of feminists, through the
Hell no. No, we don't need sexual education through the work of feminists. This is my biggest issue that I have with this community. And I'm not talking about the LGBT community. I'm talking about the rest of the letters that they put behind there. Why do we need to teach people this shit? Let people make their own decisions when it comes to what they want to identify with as they get older. Can we just keep it simple? Can we just go back to the birds and the bees? Where we were teaching kids about, what happens when your hormones are starting to erupt. When it comes to women, what to do when it comes to your period. Because women get period. Because see, if I saw her being in a sexual education class, she would confuse the hell out of your kids. She would. The moment that she sat down in that chair, you had to say, my pronouns are they, them, and they, thou. You didn't have to do that, ma'am, sir, or whoever you identify with. You could have just sat down, said what your name was, and we would have already assumed that this is what we're going to call you. We don't need to go about what your pronouns are. Another thing that I can't stand that has transpired over the last couple of years, it is confusing as hell when y'all throw those pronouns out. We don't care who you identify as. We don't care who you sleep with. We don't care we don't care. The only thing that needs to matter nowadays is that you're a good person. It doesn't matter if you're trans. It doesn't matter if you're gay. It doesn't matter if you're bi, white, black, Hispanic, Asian. Are you a good person? Can I trust you? You're an educator. Can I trust you around my kids? You're not going to try to put some type of agenda that's going to confuse the hell out of them before they even reach puberty. No, you're untrustworthy. They, thou, them, thou. I don't want you around my kids.
Sexual revolution, we are able to gain access to information and gain skills to create an equitable society, egalitarian, within our relationships, whether it be platonic or romantic. I'm so grateful for those feminists who have fought for us so we can gain those spaces and create a healthier society.
Okay, are you a believer in the government doing everything that it can to make people happy?
So when it comes, as someone that teaches in the public sector, I understand the concern when it comes to what is a teacher, what kind of information they're providing to the students. I do believe that we, as a teacher, I should be able to give that sort of information. Again, I teach college students. One of my claims is I believe that we should mandate sex education amongst college students. So yes, I do want the state, I would like the government to give us those resources so we can implement that curriculum.
Okay, you consider yourself a feminist, I'm assuming?
Queer feminist. There's variations, right?
What is a queer feminist as opposed to a feminist, just so I understand?
You know what I'm saying?
Well, so I heavily believe in queer theory. So, the gender binary that we understand, it comes from colonization. So someone who is mixed race, family from Mexico, we have the Moches in Mexico, which is an indigenous tribe. They believed in gender fluidity. And then you have European colonizers coming who dismantle that. And now everything that we understand when it comes to gender is a Western lens. So from a queer...
So you don't even think women exist, I'm guessing.
I think everyone should be empowered to...
This is what I'm talking about right here. Confusing as hell. Everything you just said, it was like a word salad. She sound like Kamala Harris. What the hell is a queer feminist? You a feminist or you're not? I'm sorry. And look, this is no disrespect to any of my followers who is a part of this community. I apologize. But this shit right here is confusing to me. It's confusing. Everything she just said is confusing. The indigenous people, they believed in gender fluidity. How do you know this? Who told you that? Who told you that? What indigenous people? It can't be the ones that look like you because you're not indigenous. There was men and there were women. There's a feminine energy and there's a masculine energy. That's the whole point of my background. This is balance right here. Balance. The scales. Balance. You need masculine and feminine energy in order for things to be even in balance. It's like they have their own language.
Figure out their identity and explore the language that best describes themselves. So freedom, America, right? America, freedom. And I want to believe in that when it comes to identity. Right. Everyone should have the freedom to decide how they want to identify as long as they're not causing harm. But that's where we get into the debate, what is harm?
So just, again, to be clear, to go back to this claim, we are debating female happiness. Mm-hmm. You are saying you do not identify as a female.
I identify with all gender expressions. So
do you bleed or not? Do you have a vagina? Do you have fallopian tubes? Do you bleed every 28 days? Do you know what it feels like to mess up your favorite pair of pants? Do you bleed? Have you bled in your life? This is what I'm saying. Like, you can't choose what God made you. You can't. You could get a surgery. You got to still go get a surgery in order for you to change that. You still got to get all of these hormones and things pumped up in you in order for you to change that. Some people not have the ability to have cycles and to have periods. Are there such thing as hermaphrodites? Yes, but that's a very small population. The fact of the matter is that like y'all sound confusing as hell. This is one of the reasons why at one point this lifestyle that you guys are in was considered a mental illness. And she seems like such a sweet person, but I wouldn't even be able to call her she because then I'll be misgendering her. She asked you, do you identify as a woman? I identify as all of them. How do you identify as all of everybody? That's impossible. That's impossible. It's not possible for you to identify as everybody.
From masculinity to femininity. So
I'm just saying, are you just saying that as a part of queer theory, you're debating whether or not women are happier after the sexual revolution? I'm just trying to understand because it seems like you're debating queer theory as opposed to female.
I believe all genders benefit from the sexual revolution.
You've been voted out by the majority. Please
return to your seat. Your ass up. You're out of here.
Hello.
I'm Zena.
Zena. Very much like your name.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Can we start with the beginning? Do you identify as a female?
I identify as a woman, yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I do want to get back to your premise. You're saying that women have been devalued, right, by the sexual revolution. This kind of presumes two things. One, that there has been a loss of worth, right, for women. So you're saying that women have, as human beings, lost worth. Women who, prior to their sexual revolution, were worth more than women today.
Yeah. I would say that, yes, women have devalued themselves by becoming overtly sexual. That's my claim. So, I mean, also according to and let's not remove this from the other part of the claim, which it has made women infinitely less happy.
Right. So are you saying, but you're saying that according to you, women have been devalued?
Not according to me. According to the time in which people are getting married, how difficult it is for people to find a partner that's willing to commit to them. And I think that's in large part due to the fact that women are offering sex for free because it was a major component of the sexual revolution was this idea.
So a woman's worth is tied to her sexuality?
It's not tied to, well, absolutely. If you're going to be having multiple partners, you are going to be devaluing yourself.
You're worth less as a human being.
not as a human being, just, in terms of trying to have a partnership and a productive relationship, certainly men are not going to be clamoring to have a relationship with somebody when there's the market is throwing them.
A man's response to your actions is what defines your worth, right?
Yeah, well, I would say that I would argue that what makes women actually happy is family. So if you're interrupting, so just to connect the dots for you, when women are having sex with multiple partners, it devalues them for men, right?
For men. So,
yes. So
men define a woman's worth.
Well, I would say both of them kind of define one another's worth, because I think the ultimate goal for people to be happy is actually family.
Okay, so you're saying
Not work.
in all cases, a woman is going to be more fulfilled in regards to family.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And this is going to work in all cases. So you're saying there's no individual case in which a woman can feel, fulfilled without being tied to other people in the case of family.
I think there could be an exceptional case for everything. I think there are exceptional cases, but I think that if we all start trying to be the exception as opposed to recognizing the rule, which is that people in life are more fulfilled when they achieve a family unit and when they have children, women in particular, especially aspiring to children, then you are going to end up with a bunch of people who are unhappy because your job cannot replace the feeling of having a family.
So what you're saying is we need to look at every individual case and see what is going to fulfill you or what is going to, I guess, essentially predict your happiness more. Because if we look at, for example, the Nordic countries, right? These are countries, I'm talking about like Sweden, Denmark, right? These countries tend to be like, I think in the past 14 years, they've been ranked as the highest in happiness and marital satisfaction from women, right? And we see that they also have been the most open in regards to like, sexual norms and sexual roles, right? So, and we also see that there's less rates of like STDs reported. We see more, and that's also due to comprehensive sex education that's pushed in those countries. So we see that and that's like a direct result of the sexual revolution, right? So when we're seeing that direct reports of happiness, right, we don't have these same rates in America. In these countries that are more sexually open, why would we see like those rates in those type of countries?
So I think you might be referring to this sort of mass-produced study that was a part of like a behavioral science study, which said that women were the happiest women in the world were women that were actually unmarried and had careers. No. Okay. Well, there was
reported happiness.
Okay, sure. I'm talking about the same thing. It was reported happiness, but it could be there's tons of studies. The point being is that in 2023, there was this massive scandal where they recognized that a lot of these studies that were being produced, behavioral science, was proven to be a complete fraud. And they were unable to reproduce these studies, and they also found that the data had been faked. The data that we can look at that I think shows, and you can let me know if you agree with this, if women, and under the imagination of the feminist umbrella, were really unhappy when they were in the home, and then entering the workforce has made women happier and infinitely feeling more secure about themselves, we could, I think, reasonably expect that there would have been a decrease in suicide rates amongst women.
You would have to go ahead and show how that correlation, right, is going to be a direct cause of women going into the workforce.
Okay, well, how can let's measure, then you have to give me a way that we can measure happiness. How can we measure happiness? So I would say suicide rates would be a good thing to look at. Drug, alcohol consumption would be a good thing to look at. Of course, right?
But we would have to, I can say at this point in society, I don't think everyone is happy. I think there's a lot of things that we need to reconcile to society.
That's what I'm getting at.
Right,
So
but we have to look at the cause, right? Why are these things predicted, right? And for example, if we talk about men, there are a lot of things we can look at, right? That tend to predetermine suicide, right? But we can't say, oh, these two things are happening at the same time. This caused this other thing.
Yes, that's right. But I do think that we can objectively say that women who are committing suicide rates more than they were in the 1950s, like it has actually increased marginally. That's not a sign that us entering the workforce suddenly made us all very happy.
How is it a cause of the workforce?
We're also binge drinking at a higher rate.
How's this cause of
opioids at a
Wait a minute. They lied about a fact check. I'm about to go back just a second. Not a lot though, but I saw that. It showed something regarding women and suicide. And that was not right.
Okay, well, how can we, let's measure, then you have to give me a way that we can measure happiness. How can we measure happiness? So I would say suicide rates would be a good thing to look at. Drug, alcohol consumption would be a good thing to look at.
Of course, right? But we would have to, I can say at this point in society, I don't think everyone is happy. I think there's a lot of things that we need to reconcile to society.
That's what I'm getting at. So
right?
I
But
think
we have to
women are-
look at the cause, right? Why are these things predicted, right? And for example, if we talk about men, there are a lot of things we can look at, right? That tend to predetermine suicide, right? But we can't say, oh, these two things are happening at the same time. This caused this other thing.
Yes, that's right. But I do think that we can objectively say that women who are committing suicide rates more than they were in the 1950s, like it has actually increased marginally.
The suicide rate amongst women is statistically unchanged since the 1950s, 5.6 per 1,000 compared to 5.9. Suicide rates among middle-aged white women in the U.S. have soared since the early 2000s. This is from an article from 2019. It said rates for white women have increased across all age groups, but they are the highest amongst those ages 35 through 64. Between 1999 and 2017, rates among white women increased by 87% for ages 15 through 24, 65% for ages 24 through 34, 52% for ages 35 and 44, and 82% for ages 45 through 54, 92% for ages 55 to 64, and a 16% for those ages 65 and older. Overall rates among white women are highest for those ages 45 through 54, reaching an unprecedented rate of 14.3 deaths per 100,000 white women in 2017. There was an increase. And I remember reading about this because I did a video on the loneliness epidemic. Here's another article. This is from CDC. It says suicide rates for women increased 4% in 2022. It increased. So they lied about that. I just noticed that because I remember reading about this. Now, I do know that suicide amongst men is the highest, especially for men over the age of 65. Yes, senior citizens are clocking out because they're probably lonely. There's a loneliness epidemic going on in this country that nobody is really talking about, but it's the truth. It's going on. So when you say that family and relationships are not important, obviously the statistics are saying different, because there are people out here who are extremely lonely. In fact, when it comes to, because 9 times out of 10, I'm willing to bet that most of these women up here are liberals, except for Candace, of course. The most unfulfilled, even though they may have all of these degrees, they may have all of these accolades. They are the most loneliest, unhappiest group of women. And I think it has a lot to do with these agendas that are being pushed on them. Like you are supposed to have a divine partner. That is what we are put on this planet to be. We're supposed to be partners. There's two. There was Adam and Eve. There's always been partners. And yes, some people are, they could thrive alone, but obviously they eventually get lonely because they get pets and stuff. They always find some way to fulfill or fill out that void they have when it comes to another person, whether it's hobbies, traveling. They find something in order to make them feel alive. Because if you don't do anything and you're just sitting there and you're alone all the time, eventually you will crash out. There was a story, and then I'm gonna get back to this because there's one more person that I really want to show, and then I'm gonna end this video. It was a documentary about a woman who was dead in her home for years. Nobody knew that she was even in there. She had lived a regular, normal life. She was single. She didn't have any kids. She didn't have any pets. They found this lady dead sitting on her couch with the TV still on. She had been dead, I think, for like 3 or 4 years. This was a real life situation. So obviously nobody even cared. This lady was just there. So yes, it's important to have connections. It's important to have somebody somebody got to care about you. Love is the highest vibration. And whatever they're talking about, I'm sorry, there's nothing that compares to the love that you get from someone outside of a family member, someone outside of just a friend. That compassion, that those butterflies. That's a beautiful feeling. And it sucks that we live in a society where that's frowned upon, of falling in love or being in love with someone else, whether you're gay or straight, it doesn't matter. That's a beautiful feeling of having a divine connection to someone.
That's not a sign that us entering the workforce suddenly made us
How
all
is
very
it
happy.
a cause of the workforce?
We're also binge drinking at a higher rate.
How's this
We're
cause of
taking
the
opioids
entering
at a
the
higher
workforce?
rate?
How is this a cause of entering
Because
the
I
workforce?
think women are being
think?
put on a pathway aspirationally.
But you're gonna have to. You're saying you think this, right? But where's the cause? Like you're not substantiating the claim. You're saying this is what I think I'm seeing.
This
Okay,
down on
pause.
her head.
You've been voted out by the
Yeah,
majority.
thank you,
Please
because
return
you
to
was
your
rude
seat.
as hell. Rude ass. She was rude. I hate when somebody is talking and somebody tries to keep talking over them, because that's what it seems like it's doing. This is one of the things that I do love about Candace Owens. She does not buckle down. She doesn't back down. She's a straight shooter. She says how she feel, and if you don't like it, that's it. Considering the fact, look at her. She's sitting up there. Look at the other girl. Look at her. Look at Candace. Look at her face. If you are enjoying this video, please make sure you click that bell, subscribe to the channel, so that way you will be informed as soon as I drop any of my videos. One last person I really want to see, because this was the portion of this debate that's going viral right now, and it's between Candace Owens and I believe her name is the Queen Maker. Now, I've seen her on other podcasts before. I've seen her on other podcasts. She's loved by a lot of single women. She's real good with those words. That's all you'll see. I remember Charleston White cooked her ass, though. I'm not even going.
I don't care what y'all. This is a woman with no man, though. Yeah. Don't talk to them women with a man. That's right. Don't talk to them women with a man. That's right. Our grandmothers who were married 40, 50 years. You talking to a woman with no man. Exactly. Try and listen. She's on the sideline. See, it's like this here. Fellas, we on the field playing the game. She in the stands watching, and she been watching this game all her life. She never got to play, so she can't really tell us how to play. She cannot diagnose us because she ain't on the field.
We live under a matriarchy, not a patriarchy.
Hi, hello.
Nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Princella, the Queen Maker.
Love that.
So you say we live in a matriarchy.
Right.
Can you give me the definition of patriarchy?
Yes. Well, the patriarchy is the idea that the system, our system in America, is being run by men, and that women are having to exist under a system that immediately disadvantages them because men are behind it. And I disagree with that pointedly. I think actually we're living in a society where people are being very much influenced socially and politically by women.
Okay, so the denotative definition of patriarchy is father rule, and where positions of government are held majorly by men, where women are largely excluded. So 125 House of Representatives are female, and that's only about 25%.
Right.
And only about 28% make up Senate, and 3.3% of Congress up until this date have ever been women. So by denotative definition, we literally live in a patriarchy.
Yes, so I disagree with that. So I think what this gets to, which is actually an important part of the conversation, is that people always think that where there is disparity, there's somehow inequality, and I actually reject that entirely. I think it's just a difference in what we're interested in. I think we're biologically wired, we're interested in different careers, and just because if we looked in the fashion industry and said, oh, well, it's being dominated by women, it wouldn't mean that, okay, well, that means that the fashion industry is a matriarchy and men have no sense. It just means have no ability to communicate how they feel in the fashion industry. I literally think that those numbers show that we're just biologically different. So I actually think politically, women have shown that they have a lot more power than men have. And I'm talking about just in terms of political movements. The most recent I can think of is the Me Too movement, right? If a bunch of women get together and complain about a man and refer to the patriarchy and scream, generally speaking, and let me know if you agree, the media will celebrate that. If a bunch of men got together and were shrieking and speaking about women, generally speaking, the media would call them all white supremacists and say that we had a misogyny problem and that things were really wrong in society. Women are allowed to be more vocal in general about problems than men are.
Well, let me speak to that. When we're talking about government and media, these are two different things. So under the denotative definition of a patriarchy, by the percentages that are occupied in the government, which is majority male, defines us as a
Quit showing
patriarchy.
that bitch.
Now, when it comes to for capitalism, for marketing purposes and control, for capital and revenue, that is a totally different conversation. But who's making the laws? I don't think that women are the ones voting to have their reproductive rights taken away, where you have rape, incest, and all of these things excluded to force women to.
I'm so sick and tired of hearing that shit. You don't even like men. Second of all, why do the left like to do that? When it comes to abortion, we all know that if you get raped, if you have an incest situation, that you can get an abortion. Even after Trump won, women are still getting abortions. I know a lot of people like to talk about the situation with a young lady who was brain dead out there in Georgia, and she was pregnant, and they wouldn't pull the plug on her because they wanted her to give birth to that baby. And they'll probably try to blame what Trump did on that. Trump wasn't the president when Kemp came out with that. Biden was still the president. So people would go to other states. The fact of the matter is why is this such a big talking point? We need more kids out here. We need more women who want to have children. We need more children, because if not, who's going to lead us? Who is going to lead us if everybody is like, I don't want to have no fucking kids? I'm a part of this sexual revolution, and I'm sexually free to do what I want to do. I could just, get skeeted all in and not use no protection. But boom, I'm pregnant. I don't want this baby. So I'm going to just go ahead and abort it. And then nobody ever talks about the fact that there are side effects to abortion. What if you have an abortion and then one day down the line you want to have a child, but you can't because whoever you went to possibly did something to you and you can't even have children anymore? We have to start thinking logical. Stop thinking just for the moment and start thinking about how these things can affect you in the long term. Because this is just a small window in our society. It's going to change into something else in the next year or so, where eventually women like this is probably going to want to get married.
I don't think women in government would largely vote against their own interests because it's majority male, patriarchy.
Okay, I think, love that point. Are women allowed to vote?
Oh, of course they are.
Who's voting that patriarchy, and then out of curiosity?
No, I totally agree. And you want to know why? Because there are so many women who think like you. You submit to the idea of men ruling everything. And your ideology is spread across a lot of women who also falsely believe to vote against their own interests just to complain about it in the end. Earlier you said that, women would be much more happier working at home, but
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want a woman running America. I don't care what color she is. I don't want to be under a woman's leadership. I'm sorry to say that, but I don't. Women are not good managers. They're very difficult to work with. They have this demeanor where they could be very catty. I think a woman running this country would be like Cersei from Game of Thrones. I don't want a woman running my government.
Don't you agree that it's human nature to want things that you don't have? Mm-hmm. So during the 1950s, which is something that you constantly bring up, it wasn't until 1994 that it was legally illegal to beat your wife. And so what we're dealing with is people wanting something, and then when they get it, they're not happy with it, and then they have to revoke that idea for something else. And so what you're saying is that women vote for these things because they have the same mentality as you.
Okay. So you're acknowledging that women have the freedom to vote.
Yes.
And you're saying that women are still existing mentally, even with the freedom to vote.
Correct.
They are voting men in because we are still victims of...
No, I don't believe in victimhood. I believe in lack of education and lack of knowledge, because one of the things that you also say...
Do you think that it could just be that more men are running for positions of office?
No, not necessarily. Because remember, the United States, the average reading comprehension of people in the United States is 6th grade. So we're not dealing with educated people. Lack of education is the cause for what we see in the world. And And if we educate the women better, because a nation can rise no higher than its woman. And if she reading and comprehending at a 6th grade level and popping out a lot of kids, you know, because the brokest people in the world pop out the most kids. So if we have those people voting, of course they're going to vote against their interests because they're voting for some utopian society that will never exist.
Okay, so that's why you think Kamala lost.
This ain't even about Kamala.
Because you're talking about women. No, but we had an opportunity.
Yeah, go ahead.
We had a male running and we had a female running. And we actually showed that Trump increased the amount of women who voted for him, right? So I'm asking you, do you believe that the reason that happened was because women became less educated during that time?
They've always been less educated. Did you know that UNESCO says that that 2/3 of the 7.7 million illiterate adults is women? Illiterate. And we have 6th grade educated people voting. And guess who? Guess the dominant population? It's white women. And so guess what? Now you have to add a race element into that, which you already know exists. Because we, as black folks, we ain't the dominant people voting people in. Okay, so now when we have to go into white supremacy and feminism, now you have to look at the mind of the people who actually have economic success and what they're voting for, because classism actually matters as well. So I'm sorry, but a lot of people vote based on their feelings and not based on policy.
Pause, guys.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it was
you've been voted out
y'all.
by the majority. Please return to your seat.
Thank you for the respectful conversation.
I'm so confused. Yo, okay, I'm done. I could. Candace handled herself as always. I couldn't expect anything less. I knew she wasn't gonna flip out. She's really good. She has a good poker face. I need to learn that because I would have called everybody about 7, 8 bitches bad. Everybody would have got cussed out. So serious. But let me get up out of here, y'all. Listen, don't shoot the messenger. Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If it's not, leave it. Make sure you all like, share, comment, and subscribe. And tell me how you all feel. Like, do you feel like Candace really handled herself? I'm open to all of your comments. I enjoy reading them. I enjoy responding. So I look forward to seeing you all next time. Y'all have a good evening.
Just trying to stay sucker free in a world full of lollipops. I'm seeing all the ops. Fake news, fake views. It's an illness, the cure to the sick shit. It's the pretty real.